The subject that that we're going to look at is history and traditions of the mountain Dulcimer. Now that is a massive subject. I mean, it's huge. It's a PhD's worth of work, and I'm not going to be able to cram too much into just over an hour session. So I thought what I'd do is to just explain my own approach, my personal approach to the history and traditions of the Appalachian Dulcimer, and how I came to start getting very interested in the history. And it was purely through the music. When I first started playing Dulcimer, I bought one and was playing chord melody style, and went to visit my friend who's a local banjo player, and he was running old time sessions. And I started to play with him, play old time music with him. And he kept on looking at me and saying, when I was in the States in the 60s, that's not how they were playing Dulcimer. He said they used to play it with a stick. So I started to look up, well, what is this playing with a stick like, and discovered note-a-drone playing, and then realized that there were pretty much no resources at all around about playing note-a-drone playing. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized that there'd been a shift around the late 60s, early 70s from if you like, a traditional, I don't like using the word traditional, but from a one way of playing, a previous way of playing the instrument, to a new way of playing the instrument. And actually the instrument designs changed as well. And there were some fundamental design changes. So I really wanted to start to study and to learn in the old style. And the best way to do that, I found, was to buy old instruments and try to play them. Now, one of the things about mountain Dulcimer is that nobody wants the old instruments. So actually finding them was really quite straightforward. And I've ended up with a good collection of historic instruments. So I thought what we'll do first is I'm going to share my screen with you, and we're going to have a chat about, first off, a little bit about the area. So I just want to make sure, so a little bit about the area here, and we're looking at this southern Appalachian regional area where the mountain Dulcimers are primarily found in the States. And they are very widely distributed across the whole region, but they are very thinly spread. So it's not as if it was a hugely popular instrument or ever a hugely popular instrument, but it did pop up all over the place. And because it wasn't hugely popular, we ended up with lots and lots of different versions of the very similar thing, all sort of occurring around the same time as people moved from area to area and just took the concept and idea with them. So I think we'll start by having a chat about this chap here, Charles Napoleon Pritchard. So Charles Pritchard was originally, I just need to get myself so I can see myself. There we go. Charles Pritchard was probably the first person to commercially start making mountain Dulcimers. He lived in Huntington, West Virginia. And this, what I have here, if I come back far enough, is a replica of one of his Dulcimers that was made by Kevin Messenger for me. And they are mighty fine instruments. the tone and sound of them is very much like, how can I explain it? For those of you that are into rock and roll, it's a bit like a Fender Telecaster. It's got a real country twang to the instrument. So and the instrument design, as you can see, it's quite thick. It's got fiddle edges on it. It's got a hollowed out fretboard. Importantly, I think for a lot of these traditional dulcimers is that the bridge and the nut both sit up over the tail blocks and the head block and the tail block. And that does tend to give the old dulcimers a lot of ring. You'll see on many modern dulcimers that this comes forward. And it tends to, if you move it forward, it tends to emphasize the mids. Whereas on these old ones, you get a lot of bottom end and a lot of top. So I thought we'd have a little listen to another piece played on one of these Pritchard dulcimers. Here we go. So I think one of the important things about this is, if you have a look, this dulcimer has a strum hollow. Okay, and as we go through the chat today, you'll see that some of them do and some of them don't. And this has a lot to do with the way they were played. In the video you just saw, I was actually playing in far more of a Virginia style than a West Virginia style, and using a quill to strike across. It's a horizontal quill, whereas traditionally, or the older style of playing this type of dulcimer would have been with a vertical quill at the actual strum hollow. So as we go through, we'll have a look at a few different dulcimers and see whether they've got the strum hollow or not. And that normally gives an indication of how it was originally played. Okay, oh, one other thing. They're painted black. There's two reasons for that. One is they're made out of poplar. Poplar doesn't take other oil finishes very well, but it takes paint. So in the area, it was a tobacco growing area where these were made. And you probably find that a lot of people around Pritchard's area had tobacco barns that were all painted black. So the dulcimers ended up painted black. And I couldn't resist recording this on it because it was painted black. So the next person we're going to move on to is Mr. Thomas, Ed Thomas. He was another commercial maker, and he lived in Kentucky. Not sure where he got the idea to start making dulcimers, or to start making the shape of dulcimers that he used. So unlike the Pritchard ones that had slope shoulders, these are rounded shoulder dulcimers. And they're also much, much smaller, much thinner, and end up being a much higher sound. So lost. Hang on a second. Okay, someone has just sent a message in to say, what are the blocks of wood on the bottom four of these instruments? And both the Pritchards and the Thomases had feet. Okay, and the reason they had little feet on them was for table playing. If you place this dulcimer on a table, the volume increases dramatically. I mean, it's an incredible increase. With 3 wooden feet, the transfer goes straight through to the table, and the table becomes a huge soundboard. So, and this is quite a difference between, shall we say, a lot of the traditional instruments and a lot of the more modern instruments, is that many, many early players played on tables, and the instruments were loud. And the precursor of these, which would have been the zithers that came across from Europe, were all table played. They weren't lap played. And what it means is that the instrument has an awful lot more punch about it. I'm quite happy taking one of these to a pub session, sitting it on the table in a pub, and knowing that I'm going to compete with the guitars and the banjos and the mandolins without any trouble at all. And if you've got something like a standard McSpadden, and you're playing out of DAD, you're sort of not going to compete. The other thing that I found with a lot of the old recordings I found is that everybody pitched up a bit. So they would often just tune up as high as they could, depending on the strings they put on. So they had a lot of tension in the instrument, and therefore a tremendous amount of volume. So they were not a quiet, play it to yourself instrument. They were designed for really giving it some, they used to say, giving it some for dances on a Saturday night and church on a Sunday morning. So. Okay, now this is Ed Thomas, and here's a shot of his family. And the next player and builder we're going to talk about is this young chap here, who is ID Stamper, or Ike Stamper. But before then, there aren't any. I haven't been able to find any field recordings of Ed Thomas actually playing. And we know that he was a really good dulcimer player. He used to build his dulcimers in the winter, take them around on a hand cart during the summer, and stay at people's houses, play in the evening, and then sell them a dulcimer before he left the next morning. So he was quite a player. as I say, there's no recordings of him, so I've had to make one. Okay, so we're going to go from a small dulcimer, the ones made by Ed Thomas, to the ones made by Ike Stamper, who was in that photograph. And it's, I'm going to have to stand back, it's rather large. So these are, this is one of ID Stamper's dulcimers, and they're absolutely beautiful beasts, but incredibly deep. I really love playing this. I was very lucky to get it. I actually picked it up. I was looking at dulcimers on eBay, and this one popped up, and the person who was selling it had no idea what it was. I saw it straight away and knew exactly what it was. So I contacted her and said, that is an ID Stamper dulcimer, and if you want to sell it to me, I will buy it off you. So yeah, so I got one of the few that he didn't make many, but he sure made something a bit special. So now I have recordings of Ike, and I'm going to pop him on now.
Where did you ever learn that little whistle part that you showed in there? Did you just make that up, or did you hear somebody else do that?
No, they used to do it. My mama used to sing with a little band in Arkansas, and he would make that whistling sound on his fiddle, or the fiddler would. Oh, yeah. Woo! So I learned it from there. It's been a long time ago. That was when I was a little boy. I was 7 and 8 years old. That they got this, but they played together, and I learned that 900. It wasn't called 900 Mile back then, but they changed that, and it's called 900 Mile.
What was it called back then?
Something about the train being off of the track. I don't remember. But it was, naturally they didn't call it 900 miles. And it's different. Some of the words are different and so on now to what it was then, you know.
Which words do you sing? Do you sing the old ones or the ones that they sing now?
More or less like they sing it now, I guess. But the old tune, you see. Down the railroad track, and I'm not a-coming back, 'cause I'm 900 miles from my home. Lord, I hate to use that lonesome whistle blow. Sit upon you, my wife, and upon you, my king, and upon you, my diamond gold ring. If that train run right, I'll be home tomorrow night. Yes, I'm 900 miles from my home. Lord, I hate to use that lonesome whistle blow.
Pretty an amazing sounding instrument, really. It's very normally when I've had a look at historical dulcimers and historical players, it tends to be that a builder would set the tuning that they were going to use for their instrument, and that would be it. So, for example, the Kentucky instruments and the Huntington dulcimer, the first two I showed you, these were pretty much always played in a 155 tuning. So continuously played in 155 tuning. Now, I got a, so you would have a bass note and you'd have 2/5. But the Virginia dulcimers and sort of everything around that Virginia area, people would play out of a unison tuning. So all the strings and all the notes would be tuned the same. It's quite unusual to find players that would do anything else, but I.D. Stamper did. But he was a banjo player, so he was used to retuning all over the place. And he would effectively tune down to either G or A minor on these large instruments he made. But he did also make small ones that he tuned up to G major. But I just think it's a gorgeous, gorgeous instrument. And I've made another recording. I'm just going to share the screen again. And I've made another recording. Let's just get this here. And this is it in 155.
Robin, we've got a couple of questions about ID Stamper.
Okay.
One about the instrument. Someone was wondering what the VSL is on it.
It is waist high.
And how tall are you?
You know, I've got absolutely no idea what the VSL is on it. I've not actually measured it, but I mean, you're talking 36, at least a yard, I would say. Yeah, I would think so. I think it's probably at least a yard. I haven't got a tape measure here, or I would measure it. I'll tell you what, if I get a chance, I'll measure it and stick it on the end.
Thank you.
What's the other question?
Oh, the other question was about the recording of ID Stamper playing, and wondering whether he was using a pick or a quill for strumming. He's
definitely using a pick, and he's definitely strumming in to out. All right. Whereas most of the early recordings of people strumming with quills strum out to in. Okay. And one of the hardest things I had to do when I started to learn to play in the traditional styles was to switch from being an in to out strummer to being an out to in strummer and become pretty much ambidextrous on those patterns. So you're either out strumming on the stroke, or you're on the beat, or you're in strumming on the beat. And it took me a couple of weeks of really quite solid work of working at it every day to be able to do the pat the tummy and, you know, rub your head or whatever to get it right. It was quite difficult, but it was worth doing, definitely worth doing, because you get two totally different tones off the instrument depending on whether you're working out to in or in to out. Also, I think that just playing with the noter, playing Dulcimer with a noter, you cut back on what you can do. So you it's harder. It's actually harder to play when you've just got a noter than it is when you're playing chord melody, because you can't hide. And you've got to make the melody believable. So it is interesting, because when I first started playing noted drone, everyone was telling me, oh yeah, but that's the beginner's way to play. And then soon you'll grow up and you'll start playing chords. And in some respects, to get your first tune out with the noter is really easy. To get your second and subsequent tunes out with a noter is quite hard. So, because you don't seem to progress. So I think that was quite interesting. That was really interesting for me, just on the journey to have to go through that and realize that you've got to make those melodies believable, and your timing has got to be perfect. All right, we've got a little video now, just of this gentleman here. The video speaks for itself.
We're in the hill country, way outside of Banner Elk, North Carolina. The folks who live way up here do things for their own reasons and for their own time. Like Ed Presnell.
Ed is one of those people who can't imagine living any other place than where he lives. You can't just drop by. It's a trip to get there from the main road. When you arrive, his workshop is, well, a cluttered mess. Somewhere in there, Ed Presnell is making dulcimers.
Well, if you spend all the time keeping it clean, you don't get none done. I got to work instead of cleaning shop.
The dulcimer is an ancient folk instrument. It's said to be the easiest string instrument to play. 43 years ago, when Ed started making them, it was just something to do when the farming got slow. He used whatever was handy. The skill came with the years. Back then, the dulcimer making business wasn't.
No, there wasn't any business at all. So far as business, I made one for my wife, and then let's see, I made the first and I sold it for $3. Then I made her one, and I sold it away from her then. I got $3 for it.
From Ed's front yard, you can see North Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia. It's one of the advantages of living in the hills. Ed doesn't play the dulcimer, but his wife does. With all this beauty around, you can't help but wonder if Ed is looking forward to finally having neighbors.
No, we don't got enough people up here.
You just might have a point there, Ed. This is Andy Johnston.
Okay, so I've got one of his dulcimers here. So this is one made by, they call him in the video Ed Prenell, but it's Ed Presnell, the way that it's actually written. And it's another big beastie. But this one is smaller than the other one. This is probably about, I don't know, 31, 32 on the VSL. But again, there's plenty there. And you can hear with his wife Nettie playing, she gets a hell of a sound out of the instrument. One of the interesting things I think about Nettie's playing, she's part of the Hicks family. And the Hicks family, other really good dulcimer makers. And they're also related to a couple of other dulcimer makers that we're going to look at a bit later on. But the Presnell dulcimers are lovely. But she played that, she was actually using a wooden stick, like a popsicle stick, that she used to strike across the strings. And that constant, if I move back a bit, that constant tone that she's getting of that, she never changes. So she plays everything. I've got quite a few recordings of hers, and she plays everything from the same tuning, which tends to all be C's. So she tends to just tune everything to C. And if you notice, her instrument and this one here have a 6.5 fret. Okay, that's not for chording. That's to give 2 full scales, one from the nut and one from the 3rd fret. So she can switch scales, but also it means she can switch keys rather, but it also means that she doesn't have to change tuning to play minor tunes, because she would take something like Shady Grove and play it in Mixolydian rather than play it out of, say, Aeolian or Dorian. So she would do absolutely everything with the same chip. And I mean, even things that were in 3/4, she would play them in 4/4. So I listen to her recordings, and you can have, yeah, whatever you want. You can have Amazing Grace, which is a 3/4. She's banging it out in 4/4. You know, you could have Shady Grove, and she'd be playing it in Mixolydian, not in a minor key. So, but there were a lot of people doing this thing. They were just doing their own thing. It's like we've always said, when you pick up the melting dulcimer, there's no right or wrong way to play it. And that seems to have been the get-go from the very, very start. They were so thinly spread that you didn't have anyone to look at. You didn't have anyone to teach you how to play, apart from, unless it was passed down through the family. So you either worked it out yourself or you played the way that your family played. Okay, I'll just pop this back onto screen share again. Okay, so here's another recording of the Presnell dulcimer. Okay, we're going to move on to Galax in Virginia and another type of dulcimer. I'll play you a bit of this and I'll get the dulcimer out to show you, and then we'll have a chat about it. Okay, oh, sorry about the sharp stop there. Let's just take this down so you can see this wide. Okay. This is Galax dulcimer. Okay, the shape was first sort of seen from the Melton family in Virginia, and they were making something similar to this from around about 1830. And it stayed with the family right the way through to, well, up to recently. It was only ever the family that was playing this style of dulcimer. Great big body. A lot of them had a double back. 4 strings, all tuned to the same note, high D. And the dulcimer was played with a whipped quill. So the instrument would be whipped by a quill. It's been described as an instrument that sounds like a swarm of angry bees. And that's probably very accurate. Bonnie Russell, who we heard playing in that previous video clip, her father, Roscoe Russell, they were all related to the Meltons. So, and Bonnie was 13 when where her father recorded a CD with her and her brother of Galax dulcimer playing, and that was, I suppose, that was one of the reasons why it came to the fore and people started to get interested in it. The Melton family have always played and have always won the fiddlers competition in Virginia playing the Galax dulcimers. They're great. I think they're brilliant for a band instrument. What this dulcimer does is it provides sort of the backing energy if you're playing in a string band. And I've heard a number of string bands where these have been played. Phyllis Gaskins is probably the most famous player at the moment. She plays in a effectively an old time and bluegrass band, and it's this instrument that drives the dancers. So I'm just going to play you another recording, and you get a better idea. I think the Bonnie Russell recordings, I think it overemphasizes the dulcimer. There's dulcimer, guitar, and ukulele in that mix, but I actually think that whoever did the mixing got the mixing wrong. They've overemphasized the dulcimer. So I've got a recording here where it's a completely natural recording, 1 microphone, 3 instruments. And you might get a better idea. Right, this is it. Full on take, and then we have cups of tea.
You start it off, not too quick though.
Okay, I can do that. Okay. Again, I'm losing my mouse here, but I think you can hear from that there's what the dulcimer does. It sort of gives a background hi-hat. It's a bit like a hi-hat on a drum set, and it gives that bounce. And when I've played it in sessions, and I've played it for dance troupes, you know, for Appalachian dancers, they love it because they can hear it. So you can hear it right to the back of the hall. You can hear that. So it keeps the timing there. Anyway, we'll move on. I'm going to move on to my favorite dulcimers, my favorite dulcimer makers. And these are made, I've got two of them, and they're made by our father and son, Leonard and Clifford Glenn. Okay, so these are Glenn dulcimers. And the reason they're my favorites, two things. One, I just love the shape. This is like that Pritchard slope-shouldered shape. And in fact, there's a very good reason for that, in that their family tradition earlier, the family sort of a couple of generations before them copied a Pritchard. The other thing is the fret layout. The fret layout on this is almost in just intonation, but not quite. Okay, this fret here, which is the 6th of the scale, so the first fret, which is the 6th of the scale, is placed at, there's two positions you can have that. You can have it in just intonation. You can either have it flat or you can have it sharp. This one's placed sharp. 6th of the scale up here is placed flat. Okay, so there's a lot of choices when you're actually playing this, and they're beautiful, beautiful sounding instruments. I'm very conscious of the time, so I'm just going to play one. Yeah, I think I'll just play one of these. Right, let's move on to these two. Oh, I'll go back one. Let's move on to these two people. We've got Gene Ritchie and Jethro Ambergey. Now, Gene is, you can hear me tuning up in the background, can't you? That's good enough. Jethro Ambergey was making dulcimers at the Hinderman School, where Jean went, and she had learned to play on a Thomas dulcimer that her father had. But she got hold of an Ambergey dulcimer, and that was the dulcimer that she took with her when she went to New York. And in the early 50s, she was recorded, and I'm going to play some of the recordings from that period.
Goodbye, girls, I'm going to Boston. Goodbye, girls, I'm going to Boston. Goodbye, girls, I'm going to Boston early in the morning. Saddle up, girls, and let's go with them. Saddle up, girls, and let's go with them. Saddle up, girls, and let's go with them early in the morning. Won't we look pretty in the ballroom? Won't we look pretty in the ballroom? Won't we look pretty in the ballroom early in the morning? Out the way you'll get run over. Out the way you'll get run over. Out the way you'll get run over early in the morning. Rights and lefts make it better. Rights and lefts make it better. Rights and lefts make it better early in the morning. Won't we look pretty in the ballroom? Won't we look pretty in the ballroom? Won't we look pretty in the ballroom early in the morning? Swing your partner all the way to Boston. Swing your partner all the way to Boston. Swing your partner all the way to Boston early in the morning. Johnny, Johnny, gonna tell your pappy. Johnny, Johnny, gonna tell your pappy. Johnny, Johnny, gonna tell your pappy early in the morning. Won't we look pretty in the ballroom? Won't we look pretty in the ballroom? Won't we look pretty in the ballroom early in the morning?
Okay, Jean was playing there with a quill, vertical quill, striking across with a vertical quill, with on an inward strum lead and a nota. But if you listen to the backing that she's playing, she's not playing the tune. And I think this is something that when I was listening to Gene Ritchie, I was thinking, gosh, I've got her dulcimer book and I'm looking at these tunes in a dulcimer book, and that's not actually what she plays. So if you go to I think it was 1963, the dulcimer book was written, and you go through the book and have a look at the tabs and look at the tunes, she doesn't actually ever play the tunes the way that they're written in the book, because she never plays the tune. She might play it fractionally on an intro, but as soon as she starts singing, she's just simply picking out a harmony. Now, at first, I thought the harmony that Jean was picking out was, oh, she's just sort of randomly picking out harmony notes. And then I've got these recordings from the 50s, and I saw her in a concert recorded in the 80s, and she was playing exactly the same backing. So she obviously really thought about the backing that she wanted to have for each particular song. She played in two styles. One she played with the feather, which was the strumming with the feather, and the other one was the thumb strum, which is just using the thumb to strum across the strings. And that technique I've seen pretty much everywhere that the dulcimer has been produced, in that everybody at some stage has just done that simple thumb strum. Some of them call it thumping. So say, I'll be thumping the dulcimer, you know, and so a lot of my own recordings, I use that technique, and it's a lovely technique to use, and you can be very expressive with it. Anyway, here she is with a thumb strum. If I can, that's it. If I can find it.
Robin.
Away low down in the cedar swamp, water's deep and muddy. There I met my pretty little miss. kiss my honey. Swing a lady up and down, swing a lady home, swing a lady up and down, swing a lady home. Blue-eyed girl is mad at me, black-eyed girl won't have me, for I married that cross-eyed gal, a single life I'll tarry. Swing a lady up and down, swing a lady home, swing a lady up and down, swing a lady home. Older she gets, prettier she gets, tell you she's a honey, makes me work all through the week and get stove wood on Sunday. Swing a lady up and down, swing a lady home, swing a lady up and down, swing a lady home. Built my love in the garden, put her in and she jumped out. Fare you well, my darling. Swing a lady up and down, swing a lady home, swing a lady up and down, swing a lady home. Way low down in the cedar swamp, water's deep and muddy. There I met my pretty little miss, there I kissed my honey. Swing a lady up and down, swing a lady home, swing a lady up and down, swing a lady home.
Okay, so you've got it there again. You've got that playing, not playing the melody, but playing a backing. And quite often she will sing a counter rhythm to the melody that she's playing as well. And it's really difficult to do. It's really difficult to do. Shirley, you had some questions.
Yes, it's actually about the tune before going to Boston. Somebody wondered what it was. I think it was the one played on your favourite dulcimer.
That would have been, I'm just trying to think which one I played. Oh, I think it was Banner Strand.
Thank you very much.
Irish tune. Yes, I think it was Banner Strand.
The person that asked knows it from the Irish tradition, so that would fit nicely.
Oh, right. Okay, I think it was. It might not have been, but I think it was Banner Strand. Okay. Yeah, and I think you can get an awful lot out of just this simple ambergy dulcimer, which is not. I have to say that his fretting was not the world's best in terms of its positioning. Some makers had a really good ear and would set every instrument up on its own by ear, which you can do really easily. So there's a technique for doing it, and you can do it without any trouble at all. Other makers would get one dulcimer set up, and then they would take a pattern, and they would use the pattern. The problem with using a pattern is that you're sort of dialing in errors. So you can, some instruments can be hit and miss. Anyway, let me just move on to, okay. I just thought I'd play this one, if it will play. Okay, so that was played on this ambergy dulcimer, and that was played with the thumb strum. And I think you can hear that you can, just working with a noter and working with your hand, you can actually get a lot of depth out of the instrument, a lot of sort of tonality and really nice timbre out of these old instruments. Tuning them up to start with is a bit of a nightmare. Okay. Right, I'm going to chat about this gentleman here, John Murray. Okay, I'll just play a little clip. I'm not sure how long this one is. I might have to cut it. But this is his grandson talking, Bill Graves.
Well, my granddad come back from the Civil War and with a little stick with notches on it. Is that what you want to hear? And started making them after the war was over. I got to play on the third one that he made. Thought I was going to get it. Now, the keys per hit was wooden keys, like these big old keys you see on bass fiddles. And you could just touch one of them and it'd stay put. She was with me when the old guy got it out. He said, "Can you tune it?" And I said, "If it can be tuned, I'll tune it." You could just touch one of them there and it'd stay put. And they're whittled out of wood. I played some on it and he found out who it was. And anyway, it was for sale till he found out who it was, and then he wouldn't price it. But he made these, and if he liked you, after him and his last wife separated, she run off, he'd go around and he drawed two pensions battles. He fought two battles. And one of them, they paid him in gold. And he'd move in with you, and money was scarce, you know. And if he liked you, he'd move in with you and stay with you a few days. If you wanted him in there, if he drawed two pensions, he'd give the missus a $10 gold piece or $20 gold piece to get groceries. And if he liked them, some of the family, he'd make them one of these. The Williams had one, and I kicked myself for not getting it. They'd hauled it off the junk. But that's the way he made his way through. And I remember one thing that he told, said that he moved into a family and they didn't have anything to eat, cornbread and molasses, he said. And he gave the missus a $20 gold piece and said her and her husband took a team wagon, went down, bought it all in groceries, and said one of them had to walk back. There wasn't room for them to ride. You know, you could buy a lot of groceries for $20. I heard him say it. One of them had to walk back. There wasn't room for them to ride.
Okay, so this is the dulcimer he's talking about. It's tiny. It's only about 4 inches across. Again, it's got little feet on it, if you want to play it on a table. It's strung up with 3 strings, and they're all very thick gauge. They're all probably 18, 20 gauge wire. And it's tuned to D, D, and G. All the same. This is a pocket rocket. It's one of the loudest, or if not the loudest, dulcimer that I actually have. It's fantastic for sitting in on bluegrass sessions because you can blow the banjos out of the water with it. So I'll just play a little clip of this instrument being played. Okay, it's fantastic. They are, these little Maui dulcimers are gorgeous, and this one was made by Kevin Messenger for me. A great instrument, and something completely different. When you take this to a session, everyone thinks, oh, what's that? And then everybody moves away from sitting next to you because they're getting deafened. Okay, I thought before we come on to the questions bit, just very last thing to finish. You can make a dulcimer out of anything really, and you can literally knock one up in a morning. We had our local village hall, which is just down the road here. We built a shed at the back of it, which was for a community shed, and we had to raise the beam. So we had a beam raising day. Everybody turned up, and everyone bought stuff for lunch. And I said, oh, if I've got a couple of helpers, I said, I'll make a dulcimer for lunch, before lunch time, and we'll play it over lunch. And a friend brought their fiddle along, and I said, right, okay, we'll build something, and we'll just, dulcimer and fiddle, we'll have it ready by lunchtime. So I've got a couple of shots of it.
I have a question.
Oh, you're having a question? Yes.
Did you play all of the instruments in public for performance? Have you used all of your dulcimer?
Yeah, I think I've used, everything that I've had, I've played in public. Yeah.
It was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Okay, here we go. So this is the...
Elijah Jane was...
Here we go. So this is the back of the village hall. And here's us. I'm just going to move these out of the way a second. Hang on. And here's us making. So basically, this dulcimer is made out of plywood, sort of 3/4 inch plywood, and roofing beams. So we hammered a box together, drilled some holes in it for sound holes, and then here I'm placing I put a couple of bolts on to be the nut and the bridge. I put 2 pieces of wire on to make 2 strings, and I've tuned them to the same note. So they're both tuned to the same note. And then I've got some thinner wire. That is broom wire, the stuff that you use, garden wire. So it's basically garden wire. And what I've done with it is I'm sliding it along underneath this string here to find the position for the notes. And it's really simple to do. And you get an incredibly accurate scale just by having 2 strings tuned to the same note, and then use one as a guide. So you're listening to one string, playing the other string, and moving around till you find the notes. And this is what it sounds like. Okay. So any questions?